honored guests, thank you for coming to this assembly. If you'll please take a seat, our meeting will start presently. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Hey Ryan, question for you.
What's up, Daniel?
Yeah, if you were a superhero, what would your superpower be?
There's a lot of good ones to choose from. I love this question because I do stuff with. Well, we both do things with like camps, like kid camp, teen camp stuff. This is such an easy icebreaker question. But 90% of the time, you're gonna get kids to say flying.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, are you like you could pick anything and you pick flying?
Now flying is cool.
Yeah, sure.
If gave me the ability to do it, I wouldn't turn him down.
No, but if that was my only option, sure, I'll take that. But I mean, like even super strength, I think is cooler than that. And that's like the milk toast version of a superpower. My superpower that I would have is I've actually thought about this one in depth because of the camps and stuff. It's given me a lot of time to formulate my ideas. My superpower would be shapeshifting. But you have to specify because there's like shapeshift into animals or like people or like what are we looking at here? My idea of like a shapeshifter is that like I can turn into anything organic, right? Like I could turn into a bird or like make myself look like another person or just like have something organic. I could turn into a tree if I needed to or something like that for some reason. But that superpower is awesome because one, it provides for a good story because it's not overpowered. Because overpowered superheroes are stupid. I hate Superman. He's dumb. And anybody like him who is super overpowered.
We'll talk about this.
It's so stupid. So like it provides for a good story because there's weaknesses there. But also, the second one is there are so many other superpowers, quote unquote, that come with it. Like if I turn into a fish, I can now breathe underwater. If I want to fly, I can turn into an eagle. There's so many cool things that you can do. You can turn into a cheetah, run 70 some odd miles an hour. Like there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. And you could like turn into one of those animals that would survive in the deepest parts of the ocean, so you could explore down there. Like it's unending the number of things that you could do.
Sure, that is very oddly similar to the answer I always go with.
Really,
but I think mine drifts into what you would call like the overpowered range.
Okay. Oh no.
My answer since like I was a teenager has been to be able to control atoms. With the thought being you could use that to, if you wanted to like alter your appearance or shapeshift or something, you could just rearrange your
or cause a nuclear explosion.
Well, that's where it gets a little overpowered. But yeah, basically, if you could change like the composition, the density of atoms, because you could also just make yourself light enough where you could fly, or you could make like your arm super heavy so that when like you punched someone, it was like getting hit by a ton of bricks or something. So that's kind of always what I've thought. It's a little overpowered. I will agree with that because you could just make nuclear explosions happen
just all around you, and then you can like protect yourself or whatever. I don't even know the semantics of what all that superpower would bring with it.
Yeah, there was a period of time in high school where I was trying to write a comic book about a character who could control atoms.
Really,
but it didn't get very far.
Did the character have a name?
No, I got about 3 pages in. So,
solid, nice backstory.
It was quality. The opening page, though, I had it all scripted out. It was a banger, but it was the opening page.
Oh man,
if I had to pick like a quote unquote traditional superpower, I would say super speed. Like if I could
That
run
one's
like
cool.
Flash, that would be awesome because it would also allow me to get more stuff done.
Yeah,
I could
right.
do a lot of stuff all simultaneously.
My favorite thing, this is a little off topic. One of my favorite things is talking about superpowers, but having another person give a stipulation on like when or where you could use it, but purposefully making it bad. So there's one example. I have a couple, but to save time, there was one example in particular that made me laugh. Somebody said, "I want to be able to jump as high as I want to." And so like that my superpower is just like I jump as high as I want to. And then the other person said, okay, the stipulation is you can only do it indoors. And I thought that was the funniest thing. There's several others, but I don't.
That's awesome.
We don't have that much time to talk about it, but
right.
So,
cool. Welcome to the Assemblymen, where it's okay to ask for directions. Here in the Assembly, our purpose is personal development. Each week, our goal is to highlight one virtue of outstanding individuals for us to cultivate in our own lives. And Ryan, what is this week's theme?
Today's theme.
Yeah, so this week we have a one of my favorite themes so far, because it's not a word we use in the common vernacular of our American.
Ryan, drop the word vernacular.
Ooh, yeah. It's not common in our everyday American lingo. How about that? Today we are talking about the theme of camaraderie.
Yeah.
And what do you think of when I say the word camaraderie?
Well, I think I think the first thing I think is it's not a word I use in my everyday language.
Right? Yeah. I couldn't even remember how to spell it.
Yeah, it's a journey when you're trying to spell it out. There's a lot of A's that just show up randomly.
Yeah.
So the first thing I think of is the Soviet Union.
Oh no.
Not because of like that I think that's a good version of camaraderie, but the word comrade is derived from like the same word, and that's a common word in the Soviet Union.
I hope you know when I edit this, I'm going to put the national anthem right under this as you're talking. Yeah, just for the memes.
Mother. That's so good.
Dan can never run for public office again.
Shucks. So yeah, that's the first thing I think of just because of the root word. But otherwise I think of, and we kind of talked about this when we were trying to figure out what we were going to talk about. I think of like war movies. Like things like Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers, some stuff like that, where it's just like, here's some brothers in arms, soldiers who are just kind of in a situation together, and they're just they're getting along with each other and trying to support each other as best they can.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, to be honest, I mean, clearly, because I love this story, I think of Lord of the Rings, clearly, but like that goes without saying.
Right. Any theme we've covered on this podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Like it always goes back to that, because that is for sure my favorite story of all time. But if we're talking about camaraderie, I don't know, I think of like a pub, I guess, like the feel you get with like friends that go to a pub, just like the old buddies, like I bring up family members a lot actually, but like my dad had this group of people that he would go up to Upper Michigan with. He went to college with, and it was like once a year or something, like they hung out. But they stuck together, and they did that every year. It was a tradition, and it was just kind of cool. And so thinking about the group of friends that you may drift apart, but you always find ways to come back together because it's a closeness. It's like a family sort of a feel even. And you kind of get that feel from like movies or stories or people that might go to the pub or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. That makes total sense.
So As an example of our theme of camaraderie, we have someone to bring forth to introduce to you that most of you will probably know. But it's not just this individual we're going to be talking about. It's the entire story in which they're a part of. And that story that we are going to be talking about is, in fact, Toy Story. So
Ooh.
Let's take a look at this guy.
Look at this guy.
This week's segment of Look at This Guy, we are going to take an in-depth look at Sheriff Woody
Yes.
from Toy Story.
Finally.
Oh, man. We're getting into the good stuff now.
That's right. We've had 7 episodes to prep for finally covering a good character.
Jump aboard the Feels train, people, because we're talking about Sheriff Woody.
Yeah. And specifically Sheriff Woody from Toy Story 3. That's kind of the movie we looked at as the kind of the best example.
To get to that point, though, I do want to highlight some things from the first 2 movies that kind of build his character to why we see a kind of a very large theme of camaraderie from Toy Story 3. If you start with if you start with Toy Story 1, which you probably should if you haven't seen them, you see that Woody, Sheriff Woody, is he is the toy of this guy, this kid named Andy, and he's Andy's favorite toy. He gets the nice spot on the bed. He's the one that Andy always plays with. He's the cool dude, right? But he's also the leader of the toys that are a part of Andy's toy room. But not in a way that he's like mean or he's putting other people down. Like people actually respect Woody. And part of the reason his character is so likable is that at the very beginning of the movie, when they're introducing the characters, they really set him up as somebody who cares about everybody else who's in the room. So Slinky, a character who he's a slinky dog, is that's his whole thing. It shows that Woody takes time to play checkers with Slinky. Like Etch-a-Sketch when it is walking away, he has this whole like, you know, inside joke thing where they would go draw, and then the Etch-a-Sketch would draw a gun, and he would like draw his like gun because he's a sheriff, and and so it sets up like he has relationships with the other toys that are in the room, and they actually like him, they respect him, and they look up to him for support when it's Andy's birthday, and they think that some of the toys are going to get replaced, and Woody is reassuring them, saying, "No, you're not going to be replaced. It's all going to be fine. Don't worry about it." And he even like sends the army men on a special mission to go kind of spy out what's going on to reassure everybody that, you know what, it's going to be fine. So that's Toy Story 1, and you see kind of the character arc where Woody has to deal with the ideas of jealousy, and then kind of redeeming the situation and bringing everybody back together. So that, and then movie 2, even at the very beginning of this movie, Woody sets out on a rescue mission to save one of the toys who had been taken to a yard sale that was considered by the humans to be like broken and unusable, but he was Wheezy was the name of this one, a squeaker penguin. He says basically, no, he's not, and I'm going to go save him because he's a part of this group. And so he sets out on a lone man journey and goes down. He ends up getting himself captured, but he saves Wheezy in the process, showing that like he cares about all of the toys to the point where he is able to he is willing to give of himself to the fullest measure. Anyway, so those are some of the things that set him up as a character who cares very deeply for the other toys he's around for Toy Story 3. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So then in Toy Story 3, kind of the central conflict is Andy's going to go off to college. And the toys are kind of concerned, like, what's going to happen to us? Is he going to throw us away? Is he going to put us in the attic? Is he going to take us with him? And there is you get this sense that it's kind of the end of their world, basically.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they talk about how some of the toys, like, over the years have been given away, and it's down to really just the core group of, like, Buzz and Woody and Jesse and Bullseye and the Potato Heads and Slinky and Rex and Ham. And that's it. Like, there's nobody else left.
And even Woody's love interest, Bo Peep, she went missing. Nobody really knows how. They don't explain it, but like even she's gone. So there is a sense of loss in that too.
Yeah, and so it's kind of this bittersweet, like sad thing of like we've got to. But the thing that is uniting them is, well, we're going to be together. Like
Yes.
we're going to make plans. Like even if we're stuck in the attic, like that's not so bad. We'll have each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then Andy decides he is going to take just Woody with him to college. And all of the other toys he's going to leave in the attic, and the other toys think he's throwing them away, and there's some miscommunication and stuff. But Woody again kind of reverts like he was in the first movie. He's Andy's favorite toy.
Yeah.
But when he sees that the other toys are being thrown away by mistake, he goes on another rescue mission to leave the safety of the room and go outside and like tries to save them from the garbage truck. And they end up then being taken to a daycare.
Yes.
And
Sunnyside, I believe.
Sunnyside, which is, there's so many reasons Sunnyside daycare is so great. It's basically a prison, but it's a Sunnyside daycare. Like it's so good. It's so good. And the whole time they're there, all the other toys are thinking, well, maybe this will be for the best, like because Andy's never going to play with us again. And Woody's kind of trying to convince them, no, we should go back. And ultimately he decides, well, I'm going to leave. I'm just going to go back for Andy. And he doesn't make it back to Andy's. He ends up at a little girl's house with some of her toys. And then when he finds out that Sunnyside, the daycare, is not as nice and sunny as they all thought it was, it's basically a corrupt prison run by a bear called Lotso Huggin, which is a great villain name also.
Oh, he's so good.
Woody once again demonstrates this camaraderie because his first thought is, I gotta go save my friends.
Yeah.
Like he could have a totally happy life, make it back to Andy's, go with him to college, and be with Andy. But he says, no, I've got to go save my friends.
Or he could stay in the situation he was in that little girl's room with all the other toys and just build a new life.
Yeah. He's got so many options, but the option he chooses is, I've got to go be with my friends because we're in this together. And then they end up breaking out. And
well, let's talk about that for a minute because the theme is camaraderie. So the whole breaking out scene, it involves the strengths and weaknesses of the other characters. Like they all needed each other in certain aspects of the breakout in order to get there. Like my favorite scene from the movie where Mr. Potato Head shoves all of his parts into a tortilla shell and he's like flopping all over the place, but he's able to like get to the sandbox area, which is absolutely hysterical.
So good.
It's so funny, like him versus the pigeon, and like, that whole scene is hilarious.
And then they're using like Slinky's spring to like launch themselves up into the ceiling so that they can go take out the watch monkey.
Yeah,
and then they've got to use they use the natural antagonism between Ham and the other characters to make trick Buzz into thinking that they're fighting, so that they can, because Buzz has been turned into his demo mode.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. You got to watch the movie. It's great.
It's so good. But yeah, it really does play to all of their strengths, which is what makes Woody such a good leader and makes them such a good team, is because they all understand how they can help each other.
Right.
And how they contribute to the overall success of their group.
And that's why Woody is the look at this guy focus of this, is because as the leader, he is able to devise the plan that allows them to do this, because he recognizes it because of his relationship with the other characters. He recognizes what those strengths and weaknesses are and is able then to devise this plan accordingly.
Yeah. And then obviously the part at the end of the movie that, like, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, is one of like the saddest animated movie like moments, where it looks like all the toys are going to get burned up in the junkyard. Yeah. In the garbage incinerator. And like they're still sticking with each other.
They all they all start holding hands and start like, and it's slowly taking them into the incinerator, and they're like, there's no way out. Which is also a very funny part of the movie after the fact. Right. But let's back up a few scenes and talk about why they're in that situation in the first place. Woody is in a position. Woody and Buzz are in a position where they can stop this conveyor that is taking all of the toys into the incinerator. But the way that they have to do this is they have to boost Lotso, who has followed them, up to a spot where he can turn the conveyor off. I wrote down here just in part of my notes that like even wanting to see Lotso redeemed and saving him from the incinerator, from the dump, it shows like Woody's like it's a good nature of Woody that is like, you know what, I want everybody to live in like a kind of a sense of harmony in this idea of camaraderie, and I want to see people redeemed. It's like Lotso, he learned of Lotso's backstory and he knew that like he's a tragic character and all this stuff, but like he wanted, you know, he kind of was forced to, but it's like I want to give this guy a chance. He doesn't have to be this way.
But right before that, he was not forced to save him in the first place.
That's true. Like, they actually had, they didn't have to save him in the first place.
Lotso's stuck under like a bag of golf clubs and is going to get ground up, and so Buzz and Woody like go and like get it off of him and save his life, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
And then Lotso betrays them almost immediately. But you know, even at that point, he is the enemy of the movie, like Lotso. And has, you know, been openly trying to hurt them and ruin them, and they still forgive him and like save his life, because the hope is that he will be redeemed and he can become part of the team too. He can join in that camaraderie.
Which we see after, is it Ken takes over the Sunnyside daycare? It's the best. Ken is one of my favorite characters in that movie. It's so funny.
If you have not seen Toy Story 3, it's so good. It's so good.
But yeah, so Sheriff Woody, kind of in summary, Sheriff Woody is a great example of camaraderie, at least him as the leader of this group of toys, because of his desire to have good relationships with those who are around him, to get to know all of them, to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how they can benefit each other in kind of this symbiotic brotherhood, sisterhood, all that kind of stuff, you know. And he's the one who heads that up, which is why he's a great example of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now a brief recess.
Dad Joke Corner.
Hey Ryan, I got hit in the head with a can of soda yesterday.
Oh dear.
Luckily it was a soft drink.
Nice. Yeah, well, had a serious situation the other day actually. I called the doctor and I said, "Hey, my wife's going into labor. What do I do?" And the response on the other end said, "Is this her first child?" And I said, "No, this is her husband."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Clearly.
This segment. This has been Dad Joke Corner.
Preparing you for the future. All right, so we're going to dive right into our next segment, which, as faithful listeners of the podcast would know, is either, it's one of two. It's either Guidance Counselors, which is not this weekend, or Here's Why You're Wrong.
Here's Why You're Wrong.
On the segment Here's Why You're Wrong, we take a quote that we find from somewhere. Doesn't matter where. It could be a book, newspaper, Twitter, whatever, or just common phrases. And we go through them and talk about what we don't agree with and why. Mm-hmm. This week, I have a quote to bring to your attention. As per usual, I don't want to reveal the source of this quote just to protect the guilty. And but this quote goes like this. People will help each other because there is a sense of camaraderie that springs up, which is a survival tactic. You help them because you know you might later need their help, and that is incredibly reassuring. So let me start out and say kind of my thinking when I first read this quote. And I wrote it out, kind of a response to this as to what I was feeling, thinking, all that jazz. And I would say relegating camaraderie to only a survival tactic, it severely delegitimizes the possibility of genuine self-sacrifice, and it surreptitiously implies that it's not of a spiritual nature.
Okay.
So like the idea that camaraderie is just a survival tactic, it kind of twists it on its head and subtly says like, well, camaraderie is actually a selfish thing. Like the reason that we do it is only because we know that we can get something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of stories out there that would challenge that idea. Like I was just watching the other day. I wish I could remember the name of this father, but there's a guy out there who he does these triathlons with his son, who is like, he's handicapped to the point where like he can't speak. He can only speak through like the computerized thing. He can't really move well. And he, like his father, when he's doing that swim thing, like he's pulling his son in a blow up boat. When he does the biking, he has a specialized seat for him. I wish I could remember the name of this guy. If I will find it, and I will put it in the description of this video / audio file. So if you're interested, go check the description. And it's like he doesn't get anything out of that. You know, the father, like, there's nothing like mentally or physically, his son is incapable of reciprocating anything that he does. You know. And like the idea of altruism, like throwing yourself on a grenade, or like doing something that you know would result in your own death. It doesn't, like, what about that?
Yeah, well, and I think you're pointing out something very subtle about this that I didn't notice until I was listening to you talk. Like, obviously, we're probably all familiar with the golden rule, right? Like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an element of camaraderie where, yeah, I want to, not only do I enjoy these people and that, but like I want to treat them well because I would want to be treated well if I was in their position.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a difference between following the golden rule and saying that, well, if they don't treat me well, it was a waste.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
exactly.
I would want to be treated well versus they are going to treat me well in the future.
Right.
Which is kind of the perspective that the quote is taking, is it's a survival tactic. Like, I might need their help later. As opposed to, no, I should treat them well because if the roles were reversed, I would want them to treat me well. And if in the future the roles are reversed, I hope they treat me well. But that's
you can't
not
guarantee
why
that.
I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm not guaranteeing that dynamic is going to be switched.
Right. And
yeah, I think.
Here's the thing: like, true camaraderie, true friendship can overcome if somebody doesn't reciprocate. You know, like. Mm-hmm. Sure, there's an initial period probably where it has to, like, you like being around the other person, they like being around you. You know, you give and take. I'm not discounting the fact that, like, maybe some of this does come from a survival tactic, and I like it when people treat me kindly, and I do it. You know, sometimes I do it because they're doing it to me. Like, it's just, you know, that happens. I'm not discounting those ideas. What I'm saying is that that's not all there is.
Right.
And so like that's why I said to relegate it only to a survival tactic is the problem here. Mm-hmm. That's not the only reason we do these things. That there actually is altruism. There is a spiritual side to life and to camaraderie by extension. And so like, and I think about ideas like what about helping strangers that you never see again? Like some people that I know personally have like their groceries paid for by somebody in line. They're like, oh hey, you know, like, let me pay for that. It's like that all that does is take away from the financial standing of that person. They didn't know them. Like, there's nothing there, but like there's just this kindness that just kind of overflows for seemingly no reason if we're talking survival tactics. Like there's something more to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when we start dealing with like camaraderie specifically, you know, sometimes there is that element of, you know, some of the words that come up when you look up camaraderie are like fellowship and community and that sort of stuff, which implies there is a closer connection than someone just on the street that I
Right.
don't know. But in either case, it flows from this same desire that my needs are not the most important,
Right.
right? That like whether that is the community I'm part of or the needs of just one specific individual, I'm going to give preference to the needs of others, like Sheriff Woody deciding to go back and rescue his friends,
Right.
rather than just doing what would make him happy and content.
Yeah. It's sometimes sometimes true camaraderie requires the willingness to be disenfranchised for the benefit of those around you. It like you cannot live selfishly and have true fellowship and to have true camaraderie. You can't do it. Just to have relationships, good relationships in general, you can't live selfishly and do that, you know, because always there's something that you have to sacrifice if you're going to be in a relationship where that involves some sort of like love, whether it be brotherly love or marriage or whatever, because there are other needs involved. It's like, you're not me, so obviously you require something different, so there's some sort of sacrifice that happens there.
Yeah.
And you know, all of these things put together is why I had a problem with this quote, that it was way too limiting in the ideas behind it, and that camaraderie is fantastic. We need it. We've talked multiple times about how we need each other, especially if we want to change and we want to become better people. Right. Like you and Toy Story, I mean, it's a kids movie, it's a you know, it's animated, whatever, but like honestly, if you watch through 1, 2, and 3, and they just come out with a 4, you know, last year or whatever. Yeah. If you watch through those, you see the character arcs and you see the changes in relationships and watch them grow, and you come to love these characters and almost feel like a part of the group. That's why so many people were moved by Toy Story 3, is because these were characters they grew up with, that they came to love, and then all of a sudden now it's a change, like you were saying, it's like an end of their world as it was, and all they had was each other, and it's like Andy's going off to college. You know, there's a breaking of that, and so there is something, there's sentimental something about that, and we feel that deep because it's like, it's not just all about me. And maybe you relate that to like you know, having a friend move away or losing a loved one or something along those lines, is because it's like, I'm missing something now because there was something that they offered, I offered them, and there's something spiritual, deeply spiritual about that, but it's not just about survival. It's that seems cold and harsh almost, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So now to lighten things up a bit here, Ryan, let's have some friendly competition, some camaraderie, if you will, in this week's debate from the annals of history.
Debates from the annals of history.
So on this week's competition, Fast and Furious competition, you will notice that once again we are joined by a new guest judge. So we have joining us today Stacy, who is so kind as to join us and to decide between Ryan and myself in this week's debate from the annals of history. So Stacy, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, telling us, the audience, how you know us and why you're here.
Sure. So I am Ryan's aunt, even though we grew up more like cousins, because we're very close in age.
Yeah.
I'm Ryan's aunt, and know Dan through the church of which my husband is pastor. But my particular qualifications to evaluate a debate are that I am a teacher. And so I have heard many debates, both fabulous and awful, And so I have a whole range of experience to
I
fall
have a-
back on.
I have a feeling I know which one you're gonna hear today. So
Yeah, I do think having an actual teacher who has to deal with nonsense on a daily basis is going to hinder my ability to kind of just say whatever I want and then make it up as
raises
people.
the stakes just a little bit because oh man, this one's rough. I don't.
Well, if it makes a difference, like I've been out of the classroom with students for so long, like I kind of miss the nonsense. So, you know,
Oh,
So you're
make
saying
it up
there's a
be
chance.
better.
here we go.
All right. So this week's debate, hotly debated. I think it's going to go down as one of the classics. Does a straw have 2 holes or just 1?
Classic.
Ryan, lead us off with your opinion.
Clearly, a straw has 2 holes. Clearly, I mean, there's no other option. If you look at a straw, you know, if you look at it sideways, you got yourself a little rectangle. You know, looking at it from the side. On either side of that straw, what we would call them holes, or at least I would, arguing this side. The reason I would call them that is because if we're taking this straw and looking at it like a math problem, like a math diagram. Bear with me. Don't make me that face. Get out of here. If we look at it like a math diagram, you can draw a plane through the end of the straw where that hole is on either side. It's the hole. It is breaking that plane. There is a circumference in those 2 planes that it has now broken the plane, and so that missing portion of those 2 planes would be called holes, and that is
pause
why.
For a second.
What's up?
This plane, is it bisecting the straw?
Yes.
Like in a right angle, like a 90 degree
Now,
perpendicular to the straw.
So you're saying if you
Yes.
cut a straw in half, you would have 2 straws.
no, I am not saying that at all.
Okay, I'm trying to visualize it. I can't yet.
Okay. Let me see. So, if pretend this is a straw, it's a pen. But
Got
for those who are just listening, I'm holding up a pen here. If I put my hand up to the clicker end right here, it is perpendicular to the end of this hypothetical straw, and so it is breaking the plane of the end of this straw, and where the hole on this side would be. I have to be careful because you're going to use my language against me. The hole on this side would be cut, a circumference would be cut right here. And so a part of the plane would now be missing. And that is a hole in the plane. And it would be broken on both sides. So there would be 2 holes.
Okay.
That's my argument.
All right.
At least one of them.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That is one of Ryan's arguments.
It's a mathematical one.
I will say, first of all, I think Ryan's answer makes sense if you're dealing with non-Euclidean geometry, because nothing about what he just said makes sense in the 3-dimensional space that we live, or I don't understand it. Anyway, clearly,
I'm going to go with option 2.
Clearly, a straw has 1 hole. Here is why. When you take a straw, and instead of holding it the long way, like a rectangle, as Ryan said, if you hold it the way that it's like a circle, so like the way you use a straw, and you look at it, you see all the way through it because there's 1 hole. Because when you look through one end of the straw and you see out the other end of the straw, because it's the same hole, it's 1 hole. If a straw had 2 holes, it wouldn't work as a straw because the vacuum that is created by using a straw sucks it up through the 1 hole, and that's where the liquid goes. If you have a second hole in a straw, it's because there's like a hole in the side, and then the straw doesn't work because it can't create a vacuum because there's another hole in the straw. There's 1 hole. It's a tube. It's 1 big hole. That's all a straw is.
All right. Hold up. A hole, is determined by breaking the plane. So if I go outside and I dig up that charcoal that we argued about that one time, if I go out back and I dig a hole, there doesn't have to be a giant tube all the way through the earth to the other side. Like, I break the plane, boom, there's a hole. If I were to then start from the other side of the earth and break the plane and somehow dig through to the point where those 2 holes meet, there are still 2 holes because the plane has been broken on both sides. It's based on where the plane has been broken, not how far it goes or where that part ends. It's just based on the breaking of the plane. That's what a hole is.
Wouldn't that be 2 planes?
Yeah, at that point, so there'd be 2 holes. That's what I'm saying. So like the two ends of the straw are the planes, the perpendicular planes. So you break those 2, and you have 2 holes now.
The problem with that is that the object that is being broken is not 2 planes; it is 1 straw. And so if you dig a hole in your backyard, that's a hole. But that hole has a terminus point where it stops breaking the plane. If you're imagining like a ball sitting, or like a bowling ball on a bed sheet, right? Like if it digs down, it bows the plane, or if it breaks the plane. But there is a point at which it stops, where the plane is not totally bisected. It is just, it has a dip in it, a hole or a divot or whatever you want to call it. If you all of a sudden take something like the Earth and you dig a hole from the bottom, and then you are starting to dig another hole from the other side of the world, and you eventually connect those, that becomes 1 hole at the moment at which you can no longer distinguish between the 2 holes, because there is no longer any earth or anything that is separating the 2 holes. It becomes 1 tunnel or 1 hole. And so with a straw, you don't have 2 planes that you are bisecting. You have 1 object where both ends are totally connected, and there is no way of distinguishing where 1 hole stops and another hole would start, and therefore they are 1 continuous hole. Even if they started out as 2 holes, they become 1 by the act of being connected and being indistinguishable.
That works, I guess, when you look at the law, like the whole thing, but I don't think that works practically, because if I was on one side of the Earth and I look and I'm like, oh, hey, there's a hole here, and then I walk all the way around, I would say, oh, there's a hole here. There's 2 holes. Like, you jump in either end, there's still 2 holes to jump into.
But if you jump in the hole, you come out the other end. It's
the other hole. You jump in one hole and you come out the other hole. No, you're changing the vocabulary. You don't come out the other end. You come out the other hole, because it's about the plane that's been broken.
I think you made a mistake when you said at the beginning of that last closing statement, or whatever that last statement you made was. That makes sense if you're talking about the whole straw, which is what we are talking about. We are talking about the whole straw as a total whole. Whole, W-H-O-L-E. If it is 1 object, there is no way to functionally distinguish between the hole on one end of the straw and another hole on the other end of the straw, because they are connected. They are the same hole. They serve the same purpose. They are united and indistinguishable.
Okay, sure. But what I guess if I can, talk a little bit back here, what I meant to say was the whole tunnel. And then you need both ends to be open, and they both are holes for you to go through, is essentially what I meant. So
that is functionally different than the point you made, and I think let the record state that.
Okay, well, let us state that, but I'm still right.
I feel like I have some questions, but I don't know how to ask them because of just the absurdity.
Okay, perfect. We done our job well.
Welcome to the podcast.
Right? I mean, I volunteered for this. So full disclosure, like, I started off sort of like saying like, oh yeah, it's hard to argue there's 2 holes. However, if you were to, like, I don't know, I'm trying to imagine like a situation in which one end of the straw is covered. Would you say that, like, is it still functional? Is it 1 hole, or is it 2, in the sense that, like, if you cover one end of it, it is 1 hole, but if you take that covering off of the other end, like, I wonder how that changes it, because then, Dan, you were saying, like, if something goes all the way through, it is 1 hole, but it doesn't, like, it can also not go through and still just be 1 hole. Like, I don't know. It's
like the Trinity. It's like the Trinity.
Yeah.
Yes, Trinity, just like it.
First he goes to relativism in our debates. Now he just goes to something you can't understand. You see what he does?
Because I think Ryan's most salient point
I tried.
was the idea that, like, let's just imagine it's a really, really long straw, the size of the Earth. Like, let's take off the whole like spherical concept and just keep it to a very, very, very long
Cylinder.
Woo! It's past my bedtime. So, colloquially, like, you would say, I went in one hole, and if you came out the other side, you would say, oh, that's a different hole. Like, that's another hole. And so, like, that is a really interesting point to me, because, like, you wouldn't say you came out the same hole, right?
Yeah, you
I
would.
wouldn't.
If it's
I wouldn't.
straw,
I would say I came out the same tunnel. I would not say I came out the same hole, because that would be the one I came in. I would turn around.
Right? Does a tunnel have two holes?
That's the same. Yeah, it's
like it reminds me of.
I say it does.
Getting stuck in the
Pooh, you ruined my
doesn't.
moves.
I would say it would if we were dealing with something other than a straw, because a straw does not have a plane that can have a hole in it. The whole thing is just one tube, and there is no additional plane that is being bisected, right? Like a tunnel through a mountain that a train goes through. I could see the point, maybe, that you have two holes, because you have a hole in one side of the mountain and a hole in the other. There is no mountain with a straw. It's all tunnel. It's all a hole.
Is it possible that a straw has no holes?
I mean, that would honestly, that was the point I was going to make, if Ryan had chosen the other option.
You sly dog.
If you were to hold up a straw and say the straw has a hole, I would assume, like, it's gonna, like, spurt out the side as I try and consume liquid through it.
Yeah.
Like.
So what you're saying here, Stacey, is that neither of us wins, and it's actually a straw has no holes.
The question is flawed. Is my ultimate conclusion is that the question is flawed.
That's a good judgment.
Based on the merits of just the argumentation, which I was looking at new points, evidence, rebutting somebody else's, and then refuting someone's rebuttal potentially. I mean, in terms of point for point, like, it was pretty even. But except for the fact that Ryan's initial point was basically, it has two holes because I say so.
Yeah, let's go.
And then he went into, like, the whole plane situation, Euclidean, blah, I'm not a geometry teacher. So in terms of, like, point for point, it was pretty even. But in terms of the strength of those points, I am going to have to side with Daniel on this one.
Get out of here. Fine.
The question itself is problematic. So that's my final judgment.
You heard it here first, folks.
I will accept this, and I will become a better person for it. So
my aunt duty.
Thank you.
Victory and become a worse person for it, because it's inflating my ego.
Well,
I will say your soap argument was totally wrong.
Yes.
That's
get out of here.
Oh.
I will die on that hill.
I will watch you do it in, like, grimy, gross fashion.
Dirty soap is disgusting. It just makes me think of, like, swim lessons in the communal showers. Like, no. Once that soap is on the ground, it's gone. Like, nope, just throw it in the trash. It's over.
Say that to Ryan's mom, who brushes her teeth with charcoal.
That was supposed to say secret. Nobody needs to hear that, because that is a huge point against me. Mom, why did you do this? All right. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for being on this episode, and for even though your judgment really breaks my heart, I gotta say, we really appreciate you.
Quite all right. I'll look at straws in a whole new light now.
We've done our job.
Well, we appreciate having Stacey on as our guest judge this week for our great debate. And in the future...
Yeah, you appreciate her being on, don't you? Me, I don't know. I'm feeling kind of sad about it, what just happened.
There's no need to be a sore loser, Ryan. It's fine. But in addition to having Stacey on, in the future, we are looking for additional guest judges to help decide our great debates, as well as all the other competitions that we have planned. So if you're interested in being featured on a future segment, send us an email with the subject line guest judge, and we'll try to coordinate an appearance.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Assemblymen podcast. You can find our episodes on YouTube, on Podbean, and SoundCloud. Just search for the Assemblymen Podcast. If you have any feedback or topics you'd like to discuss or questions you'd like us to answer, please email us at theassemblymenpodcast@gmail.com. That's theassemblymenpodcast@gmail.com. Or connect with our Facebook page at facebook.com/theassemblymenpod. This one is facebook.com/theassemblymenpod. We'd love to hear from you and continue the conversation.
Also, if you like what you heard and believe in what we're doing, please leave us a rating or review in your podcast platform of choice. And if you know anyone else who might enjoy listening, feel free to share us with a friend. That really helps us grow our audience and means we get to welcome even more awesome people into the assembly.
Mm-hmm. So what did we learn today, Daniel?
Well, I learned that Toy Story 3 is far better than I remember it being. It's such a good movie. And we also learned that I seem to really enjoy and do well when we have guest judges on the episodes. They vindicate my performance. I feel like I'm bringing that kind of level of competition all the time. But when it's just left to the comments and the feedback we get, it seems like I turn into the villain. So I'm glad to have someone here to kind of take up my cause as the winner of this debate.
I think I learned that maybe Dan is the villain because he wants to manipulate atoms and explode the world. That's what I learned today.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
That Daniel would be an overpowered supervillain. And that we need to stop him at all costs. So join up with me and my opinions because they're better than Daniel's. That's what I think.
Ryan's trying to form camaraderie here. if I am the reason that a camaraderie is created, I think that's worth it. I think I've done my job.
Oh man. Well, okay. I guess we'll see what happens. But until next time, we thank you so much for watching listening/watching, depending on what platform you're on. And until next time. Meeting adjourned.